With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
James E. Pepper Barrel Proof Decanter Bourbon, distilled at the historic Pepper Distillery, DSP KY5 in Lexington, Kentucky. This new release, bottled in a striking recreated distillery decanter from the 1940s, has garnered high praise and accolades. Coming in at number 27 on Fred Minnick's Top 100 Whiskeys of 2023, it received a 94-point rating and was called absolutely delicious with notes of delicate hazelnut and toffee. Astor Wines, one of New York's most prestigious retailers, writes, "The whiskeys coming of age now are some of the finest from any American whiskey producer. This bourbon is arguably the most impressive you will find at this age. Available nationwide with a suggested retail price of $65. Learn more at jamesepepper.com. Founded in 2018, Penelope Bourbon has been one of the country's fastest growing whiskey brands. Named after founder Michael Palladini's daughter, Penelope boasts a series of straight bourbon and rye whiskey expressions that are all uniquely blended and finished. Remarkably smooth and flavorful, Penelope is perfect whether sipping neat or mixing in a cocktail. Penelope's core expressions, 4-grain, barrel strength, Architect, and Toasted Bourbon, have received over 35 combined awards and industry accolades. In 2023, the brand won double gold at the San Francisco World Spirit Competition and Best in category at the Ascot Awards, both for its Private Select. In addition to its cornerstone expressions, Penelope continues to introduce new and innovative limited releases within its Cooper Series, Private Select, and Founders Reserve lines. Penelope's full lineup is available in select markets as well as online. Visit penelopebourbon.com to learn more and find a store near you.
Limestone Farms bourbons are like a secret portal to a world of rich flavors where high proof meets smooth satisfaction. Every barrel is meticulously crafted and blended with a specific message in mind. Experience clean delineated flavor profiles that will have you engaged from the first sip to the final drop, making your palate beg for just one more taste. Limestone Farms, bringing heritage home.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, it is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you doing out there, man?
Mark, I am doing great out here in the Bourbon Life Studios, my usual spot right in front of the fireplace. Kind of an in-between temperature day, so we've got the fireplace roaring.
Yeah, man.
Nice and toasty in here.
Good to be back, you know. It's kind of weird because we've been doing so many around the table here in the studio, so now we're back on Squadcast, which is great. I love this program. So shifting gears, you know, it's always funny when we jump back on this because I have to stop and think, how do we do this? I mean, what buttons do I have to push and make sure we're getting everything done right? So I think we got everything working right this time. And I'm excited about this show, man. To say this one has been in the works for a while would be an understatement. So I am thrilled to finally have our guest locked in tonight. This has been a couple years in the making to try to make this happen. So I'm really excited about this. But we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their sponsorship. We appreciate all of our sponsors. We could not do this show, of course, without all their help and support. So thank you to our sponsors for everything they do for us. Matt, with that said, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. We have waited so long to get him on the show. Let's not wait any longer to get into it. We have joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever it is you are getting your Bourbon Life fix, Dr. Pat Heist, the Chief Scientific Officer, co-founder, and co-owner at Wilderness Trail Distillery in Danville, Kentucky. Dr. Pat, welcome on to the show.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. It has been a couple years in the making here. The good news is I got 2 more years of stuff to tell you about. I remember, I think we were trying to connect at BourbCon there in Lexington. It seems like last time, and it didn't pay. I didn't make it to that. But I think that was our last attempt, and then so here we are today. Happy to be here.
You know, Pat, you've been a busy guy, so we'll definitely talk about that here in just a little bit. But you've got a lot going on right now, man. So we completely understand that. Now we had Haley and Jared on the show a couple years ago, I think it was. We actually came out there to Danville, where you guys are located, and sat down with them and had a great show. I love Haley. She's just such a sweet person, so wonderful. Always just fun to see her, especially at bourbon events, just to get to run into her. So I've always thought the world of her. So just enjoy that. So we had a great time with them on the show.
Yep.
But we're happy to have you with us tonight. So Pat, before we jump into the conversation, can we talk about what we have poured up? Because you guys sent us a few things to sip on tonight. So if you don't care to share with us what we got.
Yep. So we sent you the 3-pack of our 50 ml, which we call our trail mix. A very nice little package of glass Wilderness Trail bottles that look exactly like the big bottles.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
We definitely didn't cheap out on the molds for those bottles. But anyhow, that's a mixture of our 2 bourbon offerings, our 2 primary bourbon offerings. We do a 4-grain as well, which is kind of in the sidelines, kind of happening. But the two bourbons that you have, the first that you're starting with there is our wheated bourbon. So that's a 64% corn, 24% wheat, 12% malted barley recipe. And that it's kind of fitting that you're starting with that one because that's the first one that we started making when we first started Wilderness Trail.
I got you. And this is a bottled and bond, so that's a minimum of 4 years. But these range, I think if I remember correctly, these range generally somewhere like 4.5 to 5.5. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And bottled and bond is in fact 4 or more years. And then also, we made it and we bottled it. So that's, to me as a bourbon drinker, when I see bottled and bond, the straight bourbon part of it, the 4 years is great. But the fact that, the person made it that's actually bottled it is what I like to see on bottle and bond. But yeah, in fact, those are bottle and bonds.
Yeah. And for our listeners, I think everybody knows bottle and bond has to be 100 proof, but I'll throw that out there just in case there's somebody that's not aware of what the requirements are. Matt, what are you picking up in terms of the nose on this one so far?
I'm loving the nose on this. Really good sweetness. And I think the wheat really comes across well. It's got that nice wheat bread, kind of those doughy notes. Oftentimes the wheated product, I'll pick up like cherry or some like nice bright fruit notes on it. This definitely has that in there as well, but there's good influence from the oak too to balance it out. It's a really well-rounded nose that hits on a lot of different points. Nothing out of balance, just really, really pleasant.
Yeah, Matt, we were talking last week. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
No, I was just going to throw in a little bottle and bond trivia. We had talked about 3 factors related to bottle and bond, but we missed one. I was going to see if you guys knew what the 4th one was. We said 100 proof, made by who bottled it, at least 4 years old. And there's one
same distilling season.
Same distilling season, yeah, exactly. Which to me is the least of interest. I mean, that's kind of cool, but to me, those other factors are a little bit more important.
But I think if you're talking about bottled and bond, I mean, that's a good point, Pat, from a standpoint of, like small batching, because when you small batch, you're taking barrels across, and I think you guys are like 18 to 20-ish so or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, 22 to 23 barrels per small batch. Yeah.
Now, I believe what we've got, the trail mix, this is actually a single barrel though. So it's not a small batch. Okay. Is that right?
Well, it would say on the label. I don't have that exact set from you. Does it have 100 proof on it on the bottle?
It is 100 proof, and it does say single barrel.
Single barrel.
Okay, so that would be single barrel bottle and bond. Yep.
Yeah. So we don't have a small batch bottled and bond, but you're talking about the distilling season, so that is important in terms of when you're batching to get to a bottled and bond, because you're going to have to pull barrels that were all distilled in that same distilling season. So as you go around the rick house and you've got 100,000, 300,000, whatever barrels, you've got to pull those 18 to 20 that are from that same, it's basically like a 6-month period. Is that right? January to June. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it is, I think for whiskey nerds, it's really cool.
Well, it's a little more trickier, especially when there's so much attention paid to blending. You have a lot more flexibility in blending whenever you can include, a 10, let's put a couple barrels of 10-year in there to really make that batch a 4-year pop, and so that excludes you from that possibility. So it is you have to have a lot of barrels that are very consistent within a very concise time period. So that is something else that is, something to look at.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that too, because you're not going to have that luxury of pulling an older barrel, if you want to, just to add a little depth or a different dimension to the flavor profile. So that's a good point. So Matt, did you already talk? You already talked about what you got, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Yeah.
Nose.
I mean, I'm with you there on that the cherry aroma. It's like almost like a, I want to say like a cherry, almost like a donut, like a frosted donut or something. I get this cherry aroma, but I get this nice sweetness. Also kind of some of that donutty kind of sweetness as well that comes off, not like, well, maybe yeasty kind of, but not yeasty. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like a baked good type of aroma, but with that cherry and that sweetness, almost like a glazed cherry type of pastry or something. So really, really nice. A little bit of that oak, like you said, Matt, as well coming through. And again, for the proof point, 100 proof, 4.5 to 5.5 years. I mean, that's a really nice nose on the product there. So Pat, did we miss anything on the nose that you can point out for us?
Well, I'm not one to put words in people's mouths. I like to, of course, if you mention a flavor, bourbon is so complex, you're probably going to be able to pick it out if you use your imagination enough. But, kind of what you're saying about that, what I interpreted as kind of like a cake icing or a cupcake type of icing, we get that every now and then. I did a tasting one time at Jack Rose Dining Saloon up in D.C. Bill Thomas, he's one of the owners of that place. He's a good friend. And I was a little bit behind as I normally am. And so on the way up there, I was like, okay, I need to get a couple bottles to feature in this tasting. And I stopped by Kroger's and I bought the barrel pick that they just happened to have. And then I bought a bottle at the Cincinnati airport of whatever they happened to have, and they were both barrel picks. And that Kroger pick, it was like, I mean, will go down in history of that tasting. People still talk about it. And I actually came back to Kentucky. It had that cake icing kind of a flavor to it. And I rushed straight back to Kroger's and bought as many bottles as I could get my hands on. And whenever COVID started up, I actually shipped a few of those bottles out one to Bill Thomas and then another to some other people who attended that tasting, that we all kind of had this legendary memory in our mind about this unbelievable, which I've still got. I've actually got to go through my stash and see how many more of those I got left. But we do get Pat, that,
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about you, or a lot of bit about you. You've got a great background, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I remember the first time I met you, and you probably don't remember this, but I think you guys were hosting the barbecue festival over there at your distillery. I think it was in the summer of 2019, I believe it was. And I show up, and there's, I pull in, and there's somebody up on stage. There's a band, and it's like, I can't remember if it's like Disturbed or somebody, from the 90s, 2000s. And that's what I listen to, like Turbo on Sirius XM. That's kind of my thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And I look up on stage and I'm like, wait a second, that guy singing looks really familiar. So It was Dr. Pat up there busted out the vocals. And then later that day, I think Mike Hines was there. Bill Bender was there.
Probably,
You guys had purchased a barrel for charity. It was the Willet barrel.
Yep, that was the Bourbon Crusaders barrel.
Yeah, right. So they actually brought me along. They allowed me to join you guys and went to the warehouse and got to drill into that, which was for me, because I just kind of started my whole journey in Instagram and hadn't even started the podcast yet, Pat. So that was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm in the distillery. I'm in the warehouse with Pat and Shane and these guys drilling this. At that time, I think it was 16 years old.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that. And so, that was a really interesting event because it was really the first one that they had done that, Willett was kind of the sponsor of it. And at that time, Evan had, I think, had cancer.
Right.
My beating on my door over there. So it was very special occasion. And we bought that barrel. Shane and I remember that. When we first started Wilderness Trail, I had to really give kudos to Drew Colesveen and some of the people over at Willett because, just like you were saying when you first came to our distillery and were shown that, welcoming and you're tasting out of a 16-year-old barrel. And, we've tried to bring people into the inner circle. But when we first started our distillery, when Bill Thomas first started coming over there, it was because Drew told him to come over there. And we just had, a lot of thanks to give to Willett. We're very grateful for what they did for us when we first got started. And so at that event, we were very invested in it. We were like, man, we're going to be first of all, we're getting this barrel. Hands down. Second of all, we're happy, whatever it costs to get it, we're happy to really see this event elevated. And so we bid it on that barrel, and I think that barrel would have went for somewhere in the 20s, but we started hammering on it, and we ended up getting it for like $45,000, which for a Willett barrel pick, 15, I see who my visitor was, is my son banging on the door here. So. But anyway, you think about what barrel picks are going for these days.
Sure.
Some of the Four Roses picks and, even some wilderness picks that we've done have gone for tens of thousands of dollars at some of these charity auctions. And so to get that thing for $45,000, it was like we spent every penny we had, it seemed like. But, man, that would be a bargain these days. To be able to go do a barrel pick at Willett, a 15-year-old, that was incredible. And we assembled a team of experts which included Bill Thomas and a few other ones, and Drew was there with us, and we went over there and picked that barrel. And there was actually 3 other groups that got barrels that were similar to that, and we were the only distillery. So we were able to receive that barrel in bond at our distillery, and we aged it another year till we figured out what the heck we were going to do with it. And that's when we decided to release it as a charity release, which we donated that money. And actually since then we aged, I think it was a 6-year rye whiskey in that barrel. And we sold, it was a 4-grain, I believe. And we gave that away for charity. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a beer company that's got that barrel now aging some beer in it. And so it's kind of like how much charity that one barrel, provide. And it's really been amazing.
Yeah. Well, that speaks volumes about you guys, in terms of what you do for charity and support for the local community. But jumping back to you, and I'm sorry, I kind of took us down a rabbit hole.
No, hey man, that's the funnest places to go.
Yeah, man. So jumping back to you, can you tell our listeners, I think most of the people out there probably know about you and know who you are, but I want to, share your story with everybody. So can you tell us about your background, education, where you're from, and then how you got to where you are today?
Yep. I definitely didn't start off with the path to be in the distilling business. I'm born in Covington, Kentucky, northern Kentucky. That's where a lot of my family on my mother and my father's side is from. A lot of German and Irish immigrants. And we've actually got a store in Findlay Market in Cincinnati. It's called Heist Seafood and Poultry that still operates today. It's over 100 years old. My great-great-grandfather started that. And, anyway, I've got connections up in northern Kentucky. Well, when I was in first grade, my father graduated from law school and moved the family, which was at that time me and 2 or 3 siblings, down to Albany, Kentucky, which is in south central Kentucky between Dale Hollow and Lake Cumberland. Probably noticed I don't have a Cincinnati accent. So that's where I learned and honed in my skills with my current vocabulary. So down there in Albany, that's where I graduated high school from. And I always had an interest in science, and I actually won the science award as a senior. And I thought, oh man, I'm destined to be a scientist. And at that time, I had a lot of encouragement from some of the teachers that I had. And several of them have come visit us at the distillery now. So it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, very nice.
But I always had an interest in science, started off college at Somerset Community College in pre-med. And as soon as I took my first microbiology class, I was like, that's what I want. I want microbiology. So I changed my major to microbiology, ended up getting a microbiology degree from University of Kentucky, and was looking at my options, my job options. And I remember the best one that I could come up with was quality assurance manager at the factory where they make Hot Pockets. And, that would have definitely been a pivotal moment for my current status. That was it, and I was like, man, what the heck? And actually at that time, I was working for a company that put together mobile homes, delivered mobile homes, if you ever get a mobile home and you need your underpinning fixed, this is your guy right here. If you need two double wides, two halves of a double wide put together, let me know.
Now, Pat, did you put in the septics as well while you were there, or just put the mobile homes together? We did septic, strapped them down. We did shingles, everything, insulation. I was a rear escort truck driver. Yeah, okay. I was the guy in the back with the blinkers on behind the wide load. So, I started off pretty meagerly, and I was doing that after I had a microbiology degree. So I took a summer job for the Department of Plant Pathology, and I was doing kind of combination of lab work and working with extension. If you're a homeowner or you got a greenhouse or you're a farmer and you got problems with, let's say you get a pest, an insect or a bacteria or a virus infects your crops, you go to your local extension agent, and if they can't help you out, they go to the extension professors at the university level, and they help solve the problem. So that's what I did. I was in extension plant pathology and, learned a lot. My specialty was actually tobacco and vegetable crops, but I also did a lot of work with grasses. So various grains, corn, wheat, rye. Did a lot of work with greens, golf course greens and fairways.
Okay.
And so, when I got my master's degree, I got asked to be a graduate student in the department. I took this summer job, and by the time school started up, they're like, hey, man, do you want to be a graduate student in this department? I mean, I didn't have a good plan. So, and to be honest, my grades weren't the best in the world. I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur, so I've always kind of been following other things, but school was what I had going on the side while I was doing all my other hustles. And while I was while I was in graduate school, I had a pivotal friendship moment. And this buddy of mine who I met, in my early college days, he had this buddy that he knew named Shane Baker who played guitar. And I'm a singer. And so he was like, and he's a drummer. So he was like, hey, man, I know this guy named Shane, and we can get together and we can probably practice at his house if we get together. So we started going over Shane's and stuff and became friends, and me and him stayed friends, and we had a band together for a while back in the 90s, leading up to whenever I graduated with my PhD. And at that time, I took a job, oddly, as a medical microbiology professor at the medical school in Pikeville, Kentucky. Okay. So I moved over to Pikeville. And interestingly enough, one of my first students was a guy that I graduated high school with, and he was a second-year med student. And another one of my students was one of my cousins that just happened to be going to medical. So it was pretty interesting how all that came about. But I really enjoyed it over there. I've always been a teacher at heart. That's one of the reasons why I got the job, is because I had gotten a lot of experience teaching at University of Kentucky as an undergrad as well as a graduate student. And my 13-year stay at the University of Kentucky, I had plenty of time to get a lot of experience. So I moved over to the medical school. And over in Pikeville, Eastern Kentucky, you're living in Lexington. I was living in Lexington at the time. We're kind of considered Eastern Kentucky there. But you can still go 150 miles east and still be in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I moved 150 miles east to Pikeville and really loved it over there. I mean, I had a good, the medical school over there. Their mission is to, put primary care doctors in Kentucky. If you look at the big medical schools here in Kentucky, a lot of those people go back to where they're from. And so this school really benefited Kentucky. And so I really liked that about it. And it was we didn't have research to do. It was very teaching focused, which allowed me to kind of have fun on the side. And so I started consulting for a company that sold yeast to distilleries. And then that kind of evolved into Firm Solutions, which, that was basically, getting a hold of Shane and, hey, man, let's come together. We got this idea. Shane's a mechanical engineer. He's got a lot of business experience. I'm more of a microbiologist, biochemist. So we started Firm Solutions, firm as in fermentation, FERM. Yeah. And Firm Solutions, we started that in 2006. And we were primarily focused on fuel ethanol distilleries. A lot of people don't realize it, but here in North America, there are over 200 distilleries that produce collectively 15 billion gallons of ethanol. Like one of those facilities produces more alcohol than the whole bourbon industry. It's incredible. And there's 200 of those facilities. So when you look at the fact that those guys are making a gallon of alcohol, which would be 2 proof gallons to us. Their gallon is 1 gallon of 200 proof. Our gallon is one proof gallon at, a gallon at 100 proof. So they're trying to sell a gallon of 200 proof alcohol for $1.20 and make a profit. We're getting charged $27 in federal excise tax on that same gallon. Man. So the scale of profitability is very different. So fuel alcohol distilleries, the reason we went after them first is as yeast providers, you go after the customer that's got the biggest fermenter, and fuel ethanol plants, a normal size fuel ethanol plant will make 200,000 proof gallons 200 million proof gallons a year. Wow. Yeah. Enormous. And that's one, and there's 200 of them. And that's just here in North America. They're also scattered across the globe, So we did a lot of business in fuel alcohol. And because they're having to work at such a small margin, huge volumes, small margins, they operate very technically efficient. They've got sophisticated equipment, sophisticated technologies. They use enzymes and all, very tightly regulate pH and different things. So we learned a lot about how to be sophisticated through fuel ethanol, but they don't care anything about flavor. So they're grinding corn. They're using yeast strains that make a high amount of alcohol. So we first started servicing those places, and then little by little started making our way into beverage alcohol. Some of the, big rum producers, some of the bourbon producers, Scotch, Irish whiskey producers, Canadian. We do a lot of work in the hard seltzer business currently, which is a lot of sugar fermentations and different things. So the thing about being a yeast provider is the yeast gets the blame for every problem that a distillery has. So our typical phone call from a customer is, hey, man, your damn yeast isn't working. So we know that 100% of the time it's not the yeast, or 99.999% of the time. And so we got to go in there and solve the problem because we're, hey, the ball's in your court, yeast guy. Our fermenter's not bubbling right. So what's going on here? If it's not the yeast, what is it? And we're the ones put on the spot for that. It's like, what about the enzyme people? So the good news is that put us in situations where I've personally been, and probably Shane as well, have been in 1,000 different distilleries. And nobody's ever invited us over on a day where everything's running fine, just crashing on the back porch. There's always some problem going on that needs to be solved. Poor grain quality. If you're fermenting sugar, you need to supplement with nutrients. Grinding, poor grind size, milling problems, whole grain getting into the mash, bacterial contamination, raccoons stuck in the recirculation line. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. And whenever you consider, like, look at sour mash production, we didn't talk about sweet mash a minute ago. We'll have to cover that in a minute because our process is a sweet mash process where others are a sour mash. And that's where you're carrying material from the back to the front. So if you've got a circular process, if you have problems, those batches can result in circulated issues. So we've got to look at things very circular in some situations. So a lot of biochemistry, a lot of microbiology, some of it is engineering related. But over the years, we've amassed this database of knowledge, mainly in our minds. We probably should have wrote it down a long time ago. But, we've got to where if you hear a scenario, you can almost, okay, I know exactly what's going on here. Give me some data and I can tell you what's going on. And Shane can do it. Now we've got a team of 60 people that can do that. And we do business with about 600 different distilleries and breweries around the world. We're still, our best year ever for Firm Solutions was last year. And we're on track to do better this year. So things are really rolling along. And that's kind of brings us up to the point of, starting Wilderness Trail. I don't know if you guys want to grab some rye whiskey for this because –
yeah, I think we'll probably talk about, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this wheated first, Pat. I mean, you brought us up to a great point because round two, we can jump in and talk more about the distillery and actually starting the distillery and go from there if that'll work. But we'll talk about this palate and finish on this, on the wheated bourbon. And then we'll wrap up round one if that'll work for you. That sounds good. Awesome. Matt, what do you pick up palate and finish on this one?
Nice and sweet. It's sweet, but it's also warm at the same time. The wheat really shines through on this one. I think a lot of times wheated mash bills don't bring enough of the really great wheat flavor in, and this is certainly not the case here. It's got like cinnamon raisin toast kind of comes through for me. There's this warm finish to it as well. Just drinks really great. Good sipping bourbon, lots of flavor in it. Nice balance from the oaks and vanillas as well. But I think the wheat really shines through.
Yeah. You know what I like, Matt, is the fact that, it's 100 proof and it's a wheated bourbon, but I still get that nice, it's almost like a spiciness on the palate for me. And I'm not sure if that's from the proof or maybe from the barrel influence or not, but it's just a nice, it's a nice soft drinking whiskey, man. I mean, there's no other way really to describe it. I get that cherry that I talked about on the nose. That still comes through on the palate for me as well. But I agree that kind of the wheat does shine through on this as well. So yeah, really, really, really nice drink. Pat, anything else that we missed on the palate and finish on that?
I think, some justification for what you're seeing there. A couple things, first of all, our wheated bourbon has much less corn than other wheated bourbons and has more wheat as a result. So, that's probably why that wheat's shining through a little bit more. But a couple other things that I think are very important to how our whiskey comes through, the flavor, the mouthfeel. One of those would be the fact we do a sweet mash process instead of a sour mash. So
hey,
actually,
Pat, let's talk about that round two. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I want to get into that and really kind of go into that in detail. So that'll probably, because I don't want to keep you on here for 2 or 3 hours tonight. I mean, I'd love to. But I don't want you having, to be here all night long. But I think the sweet mash, because I definitely wanted to talk about that in round two.
Okay.
What makes Wilderness Trail unique? And I think that's really one of those things, obviously, that make you guys super unique.
Okay.
So
I'll save it.
Let's talk about that in round two, if that'll work for you. So I'll tell you what, let's just go ahead and take a quick break and we'll get our word from our sponsors and we'll be back with more with Dr. Pat Heist from Wilderness Trail Distillery in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky. Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The three-core team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody. Welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, is my good friend, Matt. How you doing out there, Matt?
Mark, I'm doing great out here. How are you in the Bourbon Life Cave there, Mission Control?
Mission Control, man.
Houston, everything looking good?
So far, so good, man. We're hanging in there. Everything's working without a hitch, man. So, after 4 years of doing this, you think we finally, Matt, I think we've got this down, right?
That's what you get for thinking, though.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, we're having a good time, man. Like I said when we started the show, this is one I've been waiting to do for years, man. So I'm so excited to finally have this opportunity to sit down with our guest. It's just a good time, and every time I've had the opportunity to speak with him in person, just always enjoy it. So, of course, I do have to thank our sponsors. We are presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support, everything they do for us. We could not do this podcast without them and our other sponsors. So thank you all for everything you do for us. With that said, Matt, do you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. Dr. Pat Heist is the Chief Scientific Officer, co-founder, and co-owner at Wilderness Trail Distillery in Danville, Kentucky. Pat, welcome on back to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Loving it.
Hey, thanks for not leaving, Pat. We appreciate it.
Hey, man, I'm here for the long haul.
Awesome.
That's right.
Now, Pat, we talked about music. I play bass. I've got like 3 basses hanging over here on the wall, man. So it's been a long time. So if you ever need a bass player,
hey, man, I already got your name wrote down over here. Matt, you don't happen to play drums, do you?
I play a lot of things, but not drums, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Keyboards?
Keyboards? Oh, man.
Tambourine? Come on, man.
I could probably play a mean tambourine.
Me and Mark could try and give you something to do in our band.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
You got to do something, man. Come on, clarinet, something. Yeah.
Yeah. Chief cowbell.
Got a woodwind. Get a little more cowbell going there, man. We're going to put the band back together here. This will work.
That's right.
Well, Pat, we've got something great poured up on this round. You want to tell everybody a little bit about what we're going to be drinking on this one?
Yep. So this one is, when you look at the 2 bourbons that we have, which is the wheated bourbon that you just had, this is our high rye bourbon. The only difference between those 2 recipes is one's got 24% wheat. This one's got 24% rye. So it's a mirror image bourbon, but 24 wheat or 24 rye. So this one's the same ingredient. So one of the few opportunities, really when you consider, if I was to go to the store and demonstrate to someone the difference between a wheated bourbon and a rye bourbon, you're almost stuck with buying 2 different distilleries. Mm-hmm. So this is a great example, and a lot of bartenders, like to put this on flights and different things with the wheated bourbon because it's a great example. And so since you just tasted the wheater, you can kind of, see what taking away that wheat and just adding the rye back to it, what does that do for it? And it very clearly showcases, what rye does for you in a bourbon, which is brings, that spiciness. And I'll leave it to Matt for the eloquent review there. He did a heck of a job on that wheater there.
And I was going to, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but that was one of my questions I had because I know, like you said, the mash bills are the same. The corn content is 64 on each of those, right? So 64 corn on the wheated mash bill bourbon and the rye mash bill bourbon, and then 24% wheat, 24% wheat or rye, and then 12% malted barley. The barrels are the same, right? Char 4. Yep. The entry proof, you guys are at like 110. Is that right?
Yep.
So everything pretty much is the same. So this is really a unique opportunity, like you said, man, that people can actually experience and see the difference that your secondary or flavoring grain really makes in a whiskey, right?
Yep. Same yeast, same distillery. Even if you look at 2 different distilleries, oftentimes, even if you got 2 distilleries that have a very similar mash recipe, but they're coming off at different proofs, there's a lot of opportunities. Some people go in on a bourbon tour and they hear, mash recipe is 64 corn, 24 wheat, 12%. I got the mash bill. It's like, there's a hell of a lot more that goes into it than just the ratio of one grain to the next. How much grain to how much water? Sweet mash, sour mash, grind size, variety of grain that you're using, length of time that you're cooking it for in the mashing process, the temperatures, the enzymes or no enzymes, the enzyme concentration of the malt, all these different factors. And then you get into fermentation and you got a whole nother set of variables. Mm-hmm. And then into distillation and the barreling and the aging. And I mean, it's very difficult. It's like picking, 20 numbers and trying to, get them all straight. It's to find a needle in a haystack to try to duplicate something, really. Even just being on a different geographical location, your barometric pressure, depending on where you're at on the hill, is going to change the way your still operates. So, very interesting, though. We love digging into all the different factors.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's really cool. And I love the fact, because as I was making the notes for today, I didn't realize that before, that like everything is the same except for that the wheat versus the rye. I didn't know that every factor was pretty much the exact same. So that's really, really unique. Matt, we're drinking on this now, nosing on it. What do you pick up in terms of the nose on this high rye bourbon?
Well, before I get to the nose, I always admire the fact, Pat, that you all are very forthcoming. You put the mash bill right on the bottle. Oftentimes, if it's a single barrel, you'll say what yeast was used, what the cooperage was. So you're not hiding behind anything. Yep. I think it speaks volumes to a good distillery and people that really believe in their products, that there's no smoke and mirrors out there. It's all, if you want to find it, here it is. I think this is all the info that we can give you about our product.
Oh, yeah. And, another thing that's important in our history is we are two huge bourbon fans that started a distillery, and we'll get into that in a second. But, we didn't come into this as, New York City investors and trying to double our money. I mean, we came into this as two of the biggest bourbon fans in the world that genuinely just wanted to make the best bottle of bourbon that there could possibly be, using all the information that we've gathered from every distillery that you could name. And what were the great ideas that we've seen? What were the bad ideas? What problems did that cause? So we're really in a fortunate situation to be able to be able to have that information. But also, being bourbon fans, we know how important it is to get that information. And as experts, we know how unlikely it is that anyone could use that information to put you out of business or to compete with you. Yeah. So, why not give the people what they want? So that's kind of always been our philosophy. Well, we are the people.
Yeah, Pat, you said you went to UK, so you're in the 90s. So that means you're in that Bill Curry football era. So I'm sure you had to be a bourbon.
Al Mummy era.
Well, yeah, Hal Mummy was in the later 90s, right? But I suffered through those Bill Curry years, so that made me a bourbon drinker for sure, right there. So
we'd play Florida, and we'd be ahead at halftime, and then get slaughtered. Same with Tennessee and football. I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, It was kind of miserable, no doubt about it. Made everybody a bourbon drinker in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk about Wilderness Trail. You got onto that a little bit in the first round, talking about the creation. So let's go ahead and jump back into that, Pat, if you would, and talk about what it was. I mean, you guys had the experience with Firm Solution. You're going to different distilleries, working with them, seeing these problems, troubleshooting. Got a lot of good data from those people. So can you kind of pick it up from there and move forward, how you guys made that decision to go ahead and do the distillery?
Yep. So, in Firm Solutions, one of our roles has always been education with our customers. We've always done a lot of training. I've been a faculty member at Moonshine University over in Louisville for going on 10 years. I just taught there yesterday, in fact. I'm an adjunct professor at the James Beam Institute at the University of Kentucky. I'm affiliated with a lot of different fermentation programs. I just gave a seminar at the University of Maryland a couple weeks ago to their fermentation program. So we're very linked in to education. And being from Kentucky, we're very vested in, how people get jobs and how, and also just the whole confusion that, we, and definitely me, experienced as I was developing as a scientist, coming out of high school thinking that the only opportunities as a scientist was either be a doctor, a dentist, a pharmacist, or a veterinarian. And then you realize, wait a minute, there's companies that sell yeast. There's companies that sell enzymes. There's companies that sell bacteria. And so kind of getting into, my passion for microbiology, that kind of sparked some of that interest. But anyhow, we're come from educational background. So when we started Wilderness Trail, Shane and I both wanted to have a bourbon distillery, but we counted our money, and that is a super intensive capitalization prospect. Mm-hmm. So whenever we looked at, and we were lucky because we had Firm Solutions pumping on all cylinders. So that was a multi-million-dollar company by the time that we started Wilderness Trail, and about the time that you mature a company to the point to where, hey, man, we've got inventory. We own our building. We got customers. We're bringing in revenue. Time for a little bit of cash coming our way, but it went straight over to Wilderness Trail. And so we just kind of fed the beast, with Wilderness Trail. But when we started, really, we had 1 barrel a day operation. And, it was a fairly sizable investment, especially since Shane and I, unlike many, many other distilleries, I don't know too many of them that did this, but we just said, hey, we're not going to source anything, and we're not going to release anything till it's at least a bottled in bond. That might have been why you were at our distillery. Like that was the first year we probably had a bourbon the first time you came there.
Yep.
So the fact that, that's kind of the genesis of our distillery. Wilderness, as we started, was a 200-gallon pot still capable of 1 barrel of whiskey a day. And we made, bourbon as well as rye whiskey. But we also could make rum and we could make vodka. And so having a very versatile system allowed us to use it as an educational tool. Somebody wants to make vodka, come to our factory. We can train you in the classroom, but we can also go out to the distillery and show you how to make that. Mm-hmm. And then that's very, getting over 190 is very different than running a bourbon at, 137 proof or a rum at 165 proof, not to mention fermenting grains versus molasses versus sugar. So we got a lot of really cool experience with different things. And as I mentioned before, yeast people are getting phone calls all the time of why isn't the yeast working? Well, once we had a distillery, we became the guys that got phone calls about anything. And, what size of boiler do I need to run a 36-inch column? How much beer can I feed an 18-inch column? How many barrels do I get off of it? All these questions. And we're networked with Vendome and we're networked with all these different companies. It's not hard for us to get answers, because we got customers that are running any permutation of pot stills, column stills, vodka, rum, tequila, whatever. So we can reach out and get answers for people real easily. So probably about 2 or 3 years into running Wilderness, we probably stockpiled maybe 500 barrels. We built a 2,200 barrel warehouse on what is now our campus. We started Wilderness Trail in the back room of our Firm Solutions building up in Danville. So some of the early visitors would have toured our facility in the back of when we started on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Craft Tour, we were in the back of Firm Solutions. It was really cool. We made it a nice experience. We had the laboratory. Then we started growing that campus out there. But being the guys that get phone calls about everything, we started taking calls about, hey, can you make whiskey? Hey, so-and-so's not making whiskey for me anymore. All the big guys were like, hey, we're doubling down on production and forget about all these people we're making whiskey for. So there was all these dangling non-distiller producers that needed barrels. And we're just sitting here like, in a position to really take advantage of that if we had a distillery that could produce more. So very quickly, Shane and I, being the sole owners of Firm Solutions and Wilderness Trail, we can make decisions very nimbly. So, hey, man, we got a problem. We can only make 200 barrels a year. We need to make 65,000 barrels a year. We need to solve it. Okay, we need a bigger distillery. Do you agree? Yeah, I agree. Let's get it. Done. It's a trip to Dairy Queen right there. So it's easy to get things done. And when you're looking at contract production, it's like, give me $1 million today and I'll make your whiskey and have it ready for you next week. So it's cash in hand. And Wilderness Trail's got a great reputation for making some of the most quality whiskey in the world. And so it wasn't hard for us to get those customers, and they were just falling out trees at first. Now you've got several other big contract facilities that are online, and, that never was really it was something that really helped at that time, but we always knew that, hey, we're going to sell this much contract this year and make this much for Wilderness, but little by little,
right.
that scale's going to tip. And so that was, how else would we have been able to amass 165 acres, 24,000 barrel warehouses full of whiskey, just two dudes funneling cash out of their other business? That's where a lot of that intensive capitalization came from. And we're able to just go from 1 barrel a day operation to the 14th largest bourbon producer in the world and the 18th member of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. That's kind of when it sort of hit, like, oh my God, what's happened here? And
yeah,
it's just unbelievable.
The growth has been incredible, and to be able to watch it, it's been remarkable what you guys have been able to do. But again, like Matt said, with regard to the transparency, similar to that, the fact that you didn't source, you were contract distilling for other people, you were sitting on your barrels waiting until they got of age, and you weren't forced or rushed. You didn't have other outside investors pushing the issue and saying, well, you've got to sell stuff at 2 years old just so we can make a little bit of cash back. So you guys, you did it in a great way, and it's obviously, paid off for you guys very, very well. So very, very nice. Matt, we should probably jump over and talk about this whiskey since we're, drinking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think in terms of the high rye bourbon we're drinking here?
It's really the contrast to the wheated bourbon, like you were saying, Pat, is really stark. It's a fun experiment to see what that 24% wheat to rye can really do to it. This is really bright. It's got a bright, like spicy, peppery, kind of a sharp palate to it. Then there's good like oak sugar coming through. The barrel char, the time it's spent in the barrel really shines through. Then like nice warm finish, sweet finish, almost like a ginger chew, like long cinnamon, kind of sharp, spicy, warm finish. Just really nice. This is a favorite product of mine. I really love this.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. The finish on this one just is what really just gets me. The fact that it goes on and on and on and on, and it's not overwhelming. It's just a nice combination. You still get a little bit of sweetness, but you get that spiciness from that rye that lingers. Like you said, Matt, the ginger chew. My wife's a big ginger chew fan, right? So I think that's a great call on that one for sure. Kind of reminds me of that, because even after you finish that ginger chew, it just lingers, and you get that little tingle feeling on your tongue. And I get that from this whiskey as well. So, Pat, what do we miss?
Hopefully any of our marketing people that are listening wrote down what Matt said, because we have that as our tagline on our neck tags. But anyway, with our rye, one thing, first of all, when we started Wilderness, we started making the wheated bourbon, and it took us a year before we could get into the rye. So we sourced, at the time that rye you're drinking was made, we were buying all 100% Kentucky grown rye. And, when you go from grinding, 10,000 pounds a day to 1 million pounds every couple of days, you kind of got to expand your horizon a little bit on your grain sourcing. Mm-hmm. But when that was made, and we still try to buy as much local as we can, but when you consider that most Kentucky distillers use rye in their recipe, but most don't use Kentucky grown rye, it just is something that gives our product a little bit, not saying that ours is better, but it just makes it a little bit different. I think a lot of those, flavors come through in the rye, and there's other factors that we can discuss.
Yeah. Well, we kind of started talking about the sweet mash. Let's talk about that. I think it's a good point to jump. I meant to do that a little bit earlier, but things get away from us sometimes here on the show, Pat. So talk about the sweet mash process and what that means, and how that works, so everybody understands what that is.
So explaining sweet mash is very simple, but to understand sweet mash, you have to know what sour mash is first. So sour mash, when you're making the mash and you're mixing the milled grains in with the hot water, you're displacing about 20 to 30% of that water with liquid left over from a previous distillation. That's the back set that people speak of. And again, that is the liquid that comes off the still after the alcohol is removed. So you got the remainder of the grain and the liquid left over after distillation. You filter out as much of the solids as you can, and you still got this kind of beer cheese soup looking mixture that we call thin stillage, is another a term that we use for backset. That is recycled back to the front, and 20 to 30% of the water used for mashing is displaced with that, and that's sour mashing. And that acidifies the mash. It lowers the pH, makes it has less potential for microbial contamination if you do that. And that's probably why a lot of old distilleries use sour mashing, because they're old factories. The nostalgic, the same thing that makes the old distilleries very nostalgic and gives their flavor profile a very, a lot of uniqueness. That same thing is because they're running a very old factory and they're using very old equipment. And when you have that, and even if you start a distillery with like us, we're in 100 years from now, we will have evolved a microbiology at our own facility, and so you're seeing that at some of the other places. So if you have that bacterial pressure, you have to acidify the mash, or you'll get took over by the bacteria. We built our distillery with a lot of different checks in place that allow us to run very clean, and so we don't have to acidify. And what that does is it allows us to run a little bit higher pH in fermentation, which translates over to the acidity of the distillate. And so you were mentioning earlier about, hey, this is 100 proof, but it's really going down smooth. That's one thing about a sweet mash process, which is when you're making the mash, you're just using 100% all fresh water instead of adding any backset. So we're operating at different pH. Our distillate has less acidity, and that comes through in how the mouthfeel of a higher proof. So even our barrel strength products, which are 113 to 118 proof, because we're going in at 110, we're coming out, in general 113 to 118. But even at those higher proofs, it's very palatable, and I think a lot of that has to do with the acidity linked to that sweet mash process.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And, I think some people, I've heard it explained that like when you take that drink and you don't feel the like that really bad burn as it goes down, that you can attribute some of that to the sweet mash process. There's just not as much acidity does that make sense? Or is that?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thought so. Matt, we're at the end of round 2 here, man. So final thoughts on this well, I don't think I have to ask you.
Oh, I love it. It's great. This is a single barrel bottled in bond. This drinks really well. A great experiment, like you were saying, Pat, to take away the wheat and replace it with rye and to compare and contrast.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And like I said, I did not realize that until today. I was going through notes and things, I started looking at everything. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, everything is exactly the same except for that, it's rye versus wheat. I mean, what a great contrast to really see, like I said, how that flavoring grain really impacts the whiskey.
So why do we call the rye a high rye bourbon, but we don't call the wheat a higher wheat bourbon? Because it's got the same amount of wheat as it does rye.
Are you asking me what my opinion is? Well, I would say, there's no true standard definition of what high rye is. In my mind, though, Pat, I think anything that's above like a 15% rye, I would almost consider that to be a high rye, because you get so many ryes that are in the 8 to 12, even maybe up to 15%. But I think once you cross that 15% rye threshold, you're crossing into what I would consider to be high rye.
Yep. I would agree with that.
Hey, all right. Woohoo. Matt, was
now, I will say some people say 17% and some people say 20%, but since it's not a term that'll send you to jail, we can have a little flexibility. Bottled in bond, there's no breaking the rules, but a high rye, you could say, well, I was high when I made it, and it was high rye. Same with a small batch. We get customers that are like, hey, I ferment in a 50-gallon fermenter. That don't get any smaller batch than that. And it's like, yeah, well, it's pretty much understood what that means to the bourbon drinker. But again, there's no law that will take you to jail.
Since you asked me, I'm curious, what does it mean to you, high rye? I mean, obviously this is 24, right? 24% rye. So.
Yeah. I mean, I normally think of anything over 20%. And again, it's just kind of what's in my mind. That's not a, just like small batch. It could be a 300-barrel small batch or a 20-barrel small batch or even a single barrel, and you can still call it a small batch because it doesn't get any smaller than that.
That's a good point. Matt, what about you? Do you have a cutoff point for high rye?
Oh, gosh. The number that really stuck out to me was like 18.
18?
I think 18 is a common rye mash bill for some Kentucky distilleries, kind of right around that. So I would say, like, if you get north of that, to me, that seems high rye.
Is that term necessary? That's my second question to you guys.
I like it. I will say I like it. I enjoy knowing that something is a high rye, especially if they're not going to disclose mash bill or if I don't know the mash bill on it. Because I look for that. I love rye. I love the way that a rye plays with a bourbon, and knowing that its presence was put there intentionally in like the instance of a high rye bourbon really, I think, speaks to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point, Pat, because I don't know how because you can say, oh, this is a wheated bourbon. And, people are like, oh, it's got wheat in the mash bill. But if you say, oh, this is a rye bourbon, it's like, well, that people don't accept.
Rye or low rye.
Exactly right. I mean, it's like a natural conclusion. You're just like, well, what do you mean it's a rye? It's like you want to know, is it a lower rye or is it a higher rye? Whereas I think with wheated, there's no like cutoff. People don't say, is it a low wheat or is it a high wheat?
Yeah, and when you say high rye, do you really mean low corn? Getting a little
that's a good question.
Sophisticated here.
Yeah.
I think you heard it live here, folks, on the Bourbon Life Podcast. We're coined a new term, low corn bourbon.
Low corn bourbon. Hey, as long as it's barely legal, we don't care.
Yeah, then wouldn't that be barely legal in some cases?
There you go. We hit 51%. We're okay 51. With it, right?
Yeah.
That's right. That'd be real low, yeah. Ultra low. That's ultra low.
Yeah, Michelob ultra low bourbon. Right.
Oh, my gosh. Guys, let's take a quick break before we get off track even more. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's take a quick break. Get a word from our sponsors. We'll be back with more with Dr. Pat Heist with Wilderness Trail Distillery in just a minute. Bluegrass Distillers is a craft distillery with a passion for producing exceptional bourbon. They're committed to the art of distillation, using locally sourced grains to create a distinct and flavorful bourbon that captures the essence of Kentucky's rich whiskey heritage. Bluegrass Distillers takes pride in their small batch, hands-on approach, ensuring quality and attention to detail in every bottle they make, like their limited release 9-year-old Elkwood Reserve Bourbon, which is currently available for purchase at their brand new visitor center in Midway, Kentucky, their distillery in Lexington, and select stores throughout Kentucky. And with their new distillery slated to begin operation in spring of 2024, you'll be able to pick up even more exceptional spirits from them, like their wheated bourbon and their blue corn bourbon in the spring and fall. For more details and to plan your visit, check out their website at bluegrassdistillers.com.
Hey, I'm Carrie Van Winkle coming to you from Pappy & Company, a brand I co-founded with my sisters and is deeply tied to our family's heritage. Our great-grandfather was the legendary bourbon pioneer Pappy Van Winkle, so we're all about honoring his legacy while reinventing those timeless traditions for our modern lifestyles. Our wide range of products reflect our family values and entrepreneurial spirit, from Pappy branded apparel to specialty foods, aged in our retired bourbon barrels, barware, and premium cigars. Just like our bourbon, we're dedicated to quality small batch production and infusing those elements of joy into daily life. Exclusive to listeners, we're offering a 15% discount on your first order, so go to pappyco.com and use code BourbonLife15. Cheers!
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and sadly final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement, it is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there? The fireplace still roaring out there for you, man?
I've turned it off. I've toasted my Tootsies a little bit too much. So the Bourbon Life fireplace is turned off.
I thought I smelled something. I thought it was either a Lincoln burning or maybe Matt. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what it was that was on fire, but there was something going on here, man. So
my upholstery out here. Yeah.
Yeah, man. We're having a good time tonight. This is a lot of fun. Like I said before, man, been looking forward to doing this show for a couple years now. So I'm excited that we got the opportunity to do this. We're having a good time drinking some great whiskey. And we are, of course, the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. I do need to say that. Thank you, Liquor Barn, for your support. All of our sponsors, we appreciate everything they do for us. Matt, let's just jump right into it, man. Tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
That's right. Back for a third and sadly, the final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast is a guest that we have had what episode? 212 episodes in the making
now. Yeah.
217 episodes in the making, but we finally got him on, and boy, are we glad to have Dr. Pat Heist, the Chief Scientific Officer, co-founder, and co-owner at Wilderness Trail Distillery here in Danville, Kentucky. Pat, welcome on back for the third and final round.
Wonderful to be here.
Hey, real quick, I was going to ask you a second round. Danville, Kentucky. I mean, it's not known as like the Bourbon Production Center of Kentucky. How did it happen? You guys ended up there in Danville.
Well, that's where the band used to play.
Oh, okay.
Right. And Shane lived here already.
Okay.
Shane was born in just a county over. He's got a lot of family around here. I was living in Pikeville at the time, and, nothing against Pikeville, but I'm kind of more from over in this area.
You're ready to get the hell out of there. I get it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, man, I love Pikeville. I'm not going to say anything against Pikeville. I love it there. Anybody gets a chance to go there, I'd highly recommend it. And definitely come there April 18th to watch the LMA play at Hillbilly Days.
There you go.
So, what was the question again? I totally forgot.
How you guys ended up in Danville?
How we ended up in Danville. So Shane lived here already, and, I was in Pikeville, and so it just made sense to come back here. We actually kind of, for Firm Solutions, we sort of looked up in Lexington a little bit at the start, and it just made a lot of sense to come down here to Danville. The real estate we could get, we actually, when we formed Firm Solutions, and then again, when we formed Wilderness Trail, we got to give a lot of kudos to the economic development people here in our county. They really did a good job of helping us to find a location that really worked for us. And the location that we're at now that you visited, I mean, that place is a dream come true in terms of a distillery location. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's got the old home on there,
right? Mm-hmm.
But they helped us find that place. And when we first saw it was like, oh God, it was almost like a creepy manor or something. But man, we took the fence rows down, replaced the cow crap with grass, and man, that place worked out great. And big part due to the economic development in Danville. So, when we started Firm, freight was a big deal for us. And now it's a big deal for us with Wilderness. And, we had a lot of customers like in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And I remember when we first started Firm, we got a third-party warehouse in Wisconsin to ship to Minnesota. And then we figured out that to ship from Wisconsin to Minnesota, the pallets came to Louisville first and then went to Minnesota. So we're like, we can ship out of Danville to Minnesota quicker than we can ship from Minnesota to Minnesota. So it's that all factored into it. And freight is a big deal for us. How quickly can we get product somewhere? And that's another reason why Danville. So it just worked out. We got good real estate here, both in the case of Wilderness Trail and in the case of Firm Solutions. So I remember we bought Firm Solutions in the wintertime when it was cold outside. And we got a real good deal on that building. And in the springtime, we realized why, because across the streets where they stored all the dumpsters for the local sanitation company, and that's where they compacted all the garbage. Oh. And then right next to that was the stockyards. And then it just got worse as you went on. Well, over the last 20 years, the stockyards is gone. Now it's Center College lacrosse field. The dumpster place right across from Firm Solutions is gone. Now it's the Center College baseball field. So if you want to come watch a Center College baseball game, just grab a lawn chair and pitch it on the roof at Firm Solutions. Bird's eye view right over at the first base line.
Yeah, that's a good deal. Well, it's a beautiful campus out there you guys got. I haven't been out there in about a year or so, but need to head back out there for sure. But it is beautiful, great facilities. It's been a while, like I said, so I've been out there, but need to change that and head back out there sometime soon. So, Pat, this round we got the final pour of the evening. Can you tell us what we got poured up for this third and final round?
Yep, that is our rye whiskey. So that is a single barrel bottled in bond, also in as part of the trail mix there. A rye whiskey, most rye whiskeys are 95% rye, 5% malted barley, probably because that is the stock recipe for rye whiskey produced by MGP, or one of them. And so a lot of customers that sourced rye from MGP, a lot of them, would go on and start making that same recipe again. So we didn't want to have the same recipe as everybody else, even though we really love that recipe. So we did a 56% rye, 33% corn. So we call it a Kentucky rye, put a little bit of corn in there, sweeten it up a bit. And then 11% malted barley. So, a little bit more malted barley than you typically see in a it's definitely of a 95.5 rye. A lot less rye, and then that little splash of corn there. So, some other things that make our rye, our rye, and I've said this a million times, I believe our rye is the best rye on the planet. I mean, normally when I talk about our distillery versus other distilleries, and it's all about, hey, ours is different and ours is whatever, but our rye is the best rye on the planet. It just really is. And part of that is because of the mash recipe. Part of that is because of the sweet mash recipe. But a lot of it has to do with our barrel entry proof and the fact that we're coming out at a pretty low proof relative to other distilleries. You're coming out at 113 to 118 and bottling at 100 bottle in bond. It doesn't take much of a dilution. And I think what we're missing in a lot of other rye whiskeys is the fact that, they're bottled at 80 to 90 proof, and it just takes such an enormous dilution, especially when you consider a lot of them are barreled at 125, coming out in potentially in the 130s. To get to an 80 or a 90 takes a significant amount of fresh water dilution. So our rye is really one of the few examples where you get a lot more of what came out of the barrel undiluted. So the color, the complexity, everything we're trying to give the customer is there, heavy dose of it, and that's due to that lack of dilution. And that is probably in a nutshell what really makes our rye so delicious.
Now your other two, the bourbons we talked about, the wheated and the high rye, those go into the barrel at 110, but now the rye goes in at 100. Is that right?
Well, when we first started doing rye, we did 100, 105,
okay.
Usually between those two. I think now we're going in at 105 with the rye. So even more, we're even lower proof when we come out of the barrel, so it doesn't take much of a dilution to get down there. And our single barrel cask strength offerings are just at a very drinkable proof. I think that's one of the things, when Shane and I kind of drew that line in the sand and said, hey, we're not going to release a product till can be called a bottle in bond. We really thought, okay, well, what different ways, what different tricks can we pull to make a bottle in bond taste as good as it possibly can at 4.5 to 5 years? We didn't want to wait like 8 years to start getting any money back out of this deal. I mean, we're already kind of stretching ourselves a little thin by saying bottle in bond. And I believe our first whiskeys was around 5.5 years that we released. But, just going in at that lower entry proof and then having that slight bit of dilution, it also helps massively on the complexity and the color and the balance of our bourbons. But our rye, whenever you look at other popular ryes that are bottled at lower proof, it's just, I think, one thing that really makes our rye stand out.
Yeah, Matt, and the color on it is gorgeous, this rye at 100 proof. It's just very nice dark color.
And that's 100% of what came out of one barrel. No blending. We blended some water in it to get it down to bottle and bond, but that probably was just a drop or two. It probably wasn't much water at all.
Yeah, which is crazy. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the nose on this one?
This barrel is great. I got to say, and I love the nose and a lot of the flavors that comes off of the Wilderness Trail Rye. To me, they're always really heavy on the herbal notes, which I love. This one has a lot of mint, like a lot of spearmint gum, almost like mixed in with some bubble gum on it. Nice, like vanilla, kind of chewy taffy vanilla note. Oftentimes, I don't get it on this one, but oftentimes I'll pick up a dill note on the nose and on the palate for some of these. And there's like just a tiny touch of green apple, which is another telltale that I often find out of a Wilderness Trail Rye. And on the nose, there's just this faint little bit, but the nose on this one is absolutely lovely.
Matt, can I tell you something crazy? It could just because we had Danny Kahn on the show and he was talking about whatever the compounds are that create the coconut aroma, but I swear I picked up a hint of coconut on this rye, which sounds crazy, but coming out of the barrel, I mean, could be, I don't know. Pat, maybe I'm crazy, man.
Well, and that corn there, the corn offers that little bit of sweetness, which contrasts with the spicy, and it does kind of kick off some interesting, contrasting notes there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I get like
something else. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say almost like a brown sugar type of an aroma as well on this one. Man, just a lot of things going on for 100 proof, and the age on this one are we talking around the same age on this one as well for the rye? Yeah,
that would be 4.5 to 5.5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
It noses to me. Of course, rye whiskey, I don't know. It seems like it matures maybe faster or quicker and you get those older kind of aromas off of it. But this one does when I nose it, it noses older, than 4.5 or 5 years old. So, but go ahead, Pat.
Something else. Well, one of the other things that back into the point of, we want to make the best whiskey possible at that 4 to 5 year mark. One of the decisions we made was to go with a barrel that, when you talk about barrels, a lot of times the conversation doesn't go much farther past, hey, it's white oak, it's charred, the number char, it was number 3, number 4 char,
Yeah.
But in addition to ours being white oak, number 4 char, we went with a special barrel that's made by Independent Stave called the Cooper Select barrel. And one thing that makes it unique is the wood is air dried for an extensive period of time. I would guess, based on what we know about the industry, most Kentucky bourbons go into a barrel that the wood was air dried. The staves were set outside and get rained on and exposed to the seasons for a period of 3 to 6 months. Ours were 18 to 24 month air dried. And the barrel makers refer to that process as deacidification. So you actually have volatilization of tannins off of the wood.
Yep.
And so it takes less time for those tannins to be, remediated through maturation. So that's another big deal for us, and it sets us apart. And I think one of the reasons that complements the sweet mash to give such a palatable product at between 4 to 6 years old. But that's definitely something that seasoning increases the porosity of the wood. You've got fungi. I mean, if you let that wood set out there for 10 years, you'd have a pile of nothing. But 2 years into it, you get the start of that breakdown process, converts very large wood structures like cellulose and hemicellulose into smaller pieces that are more easily extractable. And then you also have that deacidification process that occurs to relieve some of that tannic acid. Now, if you know that a bourbon is going to be in a barrel for 7, 8+ years, you can save the money and go into the less seasoned barrels. But us starting off knowing that, hey, man, we're going to be releasing bottle and bond, we aren't going to wait much longer than 5 years.
That's a great way I'd never heard anybody describe it, and it makes perfect sense, Pat. So thank you for doing that, because I've never heard anybody really describe that process that way, but it makes perfect sense because by air drying those staves for a longer period of time, you're really cutting down on what you'd have to deal with in terms of maturation in the barrel in a warehouse for that added period of time to get rid of those tannins and everything else that you want to get rid of. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the recent, I guess it was back in November 22, somewhere around there. the deal. You guys.
Yep, October, I think it was Halloween of 2022.
Yeah. So a big deal, big news for you guys. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship, things with Campari and all that, the transaction, everything that happened there?
Yeah. So, I think kind of, leading up to that, Shane and I found ourselves in a position to where here we've created this enormous distillery in 10 years. It's like, my God, are we going to be able to manage this, and we were in 40 something states. I had an apartment over in Sweden with my then girlfriend, my current wife. We, we're living over there. I was doing business in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Germany, France. And I mean, things were just getting, and we're doing all the work ourselves. I mean, we had me and Haley and Jarrett and Macaulay, Shane. I mean, we're scattered all over the place, managing all this business. I mean, it was just amazing. And, doing podcasts and different things. We've been so fortunate to have gotten a lot of earned media through. I mean, my mother called me one night and was like, "Oh my God, you guys were just on Jeopardy." They used us as a clue on Jeopardy one night, like 2 weeks before Alex Trebek went off the show.
Oh, man. That's
and Wilderness
awesome.
Trail was the answer. And then the guy buzzed in and said, "What is Kentucky?" The category was states. And so it's like immediately, how many millions of viewers saw that? We got, in Forbes, the disruptors, mash disruptors, the sweet mash, we've just been very fortunate to take on all these. I gave a TED talk at one time.
Yeah, I've seen that.
If anybody wants to be reminded what I just said about the barrels, you can put in Pat Heist TED talk in a Google search and it'll come right up. But, things like that, you get thousands of people that attended that, thousands of views, podcasts that we've done, people that we've talked to. I didn't realize it when I was a medical micro professor, but the 800 students that I had that are all practicing doctors all over the United States all have bourbon groups now. I mean, they just came and did a class reunion at the distillery with like 200 of my previous medical students.
That's great.
You can't pay for that kind of brand ambassador support. And not to mention the hundreds of Firm Solutions customers that we've got.
Right.
I mean, we get in front, all the people we lecture in front of at colleges, the people we get in front of at the Jim Beam conference, all these different, we get these opportunities that other distilleries a lot of times have to pay for. And these are opportunities that we've been invited to as experts. Hey, come and give a keynote address at this. And you're the most important person in the room. And to get your message across, you've got a whole room full of fans. So it's just been amazing. But back to your question about Campari, we've always had good luck with that strategy. But when you're looking at going from a 50,000 case brand to 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 million, which we've laid the juice down to do, which is one thing that was very interesting to them about our deal. We're not just hanging on by a thread. We've got a thriving distillery. We got tens of thousands of people that are coming to visit. We got all this inventory laid back. We're putting out 10-year-old whiskey. But we needed the support of someone who had the more global, already in place. And so, we came into that and made a deal with Campari, which is a public, it's public information. Right. And from the get-go, things have been changing and we've been slowly getting, the things that we wanted to get out of the deal and things are going really well. And we're looking forward to, continuing to drive that home and to, make this a multi-million case brand in a very short period of time.
I mean, that's great. I think, people have speculated. I mean, I think we even did a crew episode. We kind of speculated, what does it mean? What's going to happen to Wilderness Trail? Everybody's kind of speculating what's going to happen. So the brand, obviously Wilderness Trail as a brand is continuing, and you do continue. So it's not, Wilderness Trail isn't going to disappear anytime soon or anything like that. So, but I think, from a perspective, a lot of people have asked me in terms of like Beam and other places, makers, with the Suntory investment, things like that. I mean, it seems like for those brands that it's opened up, like you kind of said, other opportunities, more expansion, more opportunity to reach even globally as well. So it seems like it's a good fit for you guys. And you got the WT, so they had Wild Turkey, they got Wilderness Trail, so
That's
the
right.
WT fits right in there, right?
That's right. Instead of a cease and desist letter, they sent us an option to purchase. So we're very grateful for that. But, that's a good point, bringing on we're just kind of starting to, communicate a little more deeply about, innovation and different things. But you can imagine the opportunities that exist for very creative projects, between two very well-known distilleries that, make whiskey in very different ways. And so I think there's a lot of synergies to be had between the two distilleries. And like I said, some extremely creative opportunities that we'll hopefully be taking advantage of as we're moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's great. Congratulations to you and Shane for that too. I mean, that's awesome. It's awesome to see you guys have reached that level of success. So congratulations on that. Matt, let's jump back to the whiskey. Let's talk about this rye. What do you think in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
Oh, the palate on this is just as good as the nose. To me, right up front, there's like a sweet orange marmalade note that comes across with like thyme, the herb of thyme. A little bit of thyme comes through. Then there's like a floral wildflower type kind of taste, long, sweet honey finish with a little bit of mint, herbal notes to follow it up. Just really, really great drinking rye. It hits on so many levels. It's not overly spicy. It certainly does not lack in flavor. It doesn't seem watery. It's got a great mouthfeel. Just really, really great sipping rye whiskey.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. Matt. I mean, yeah, Pat. I mean, honestly, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and say, good job, Matt.
Yeah, that was a great answer, I'm going to have to say. Now, I will comment kind of to piggyback on your orange marmalade note. One of my favorite cocktails to make with our rye whiskey is a paper plane, which happens to have Aperol in there, which is one of Campari's products.
All right.
So, rye whiskey, Wilderness Trail rye, please, Aperol, lemon juice, and then I think some type of like a Amaro type of a liqueur.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is a fantastic cocktail. Something that, just kind of takes you away from I really like old fashions and Manhattans, but paper plane is just such a delicious cocktail. And that's probably my favorite thing to make with our rye when I'm not drinking it neat.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Pat, because this past year over the summer, I started experimenting more with different cocktails and different recipes. And somebody turned me on to the paper plane over the summer, and that became like my summertime drink. And I became a huge fan and bought all the ingredients. So I'm gonna start making it with your rye now, so I can experience that.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a delicious cocktail. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the future here, because we're almost at the end of round 3 here, Pat. So what does the future look like for you, for Wilderness Trail? Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, Shane and I, we've always had this fantasy that one day we're going to slow down, but as evidenced by, unlimited cash in the bank and the ability to slow down, yet we really haven't. I think I did get my dishwasher fixed, though I was very thankful for that. But, we can't help but keep our hands in the pie here. We still own 30% of Wilderness Trail. We're very active in the business, out trying to sell whiskey. So I think, we've still got, at least a decade probably in us to continue that. And I'm sure we'll, that's our legacy right there. I don't know that we'll ever do anything that quite, matches up to Wilderness Trail. And so we're very vested in that, and we want to see it be successful and be, a major brand for hundreds of years. Firm Solutions is pumping on all cylinders. Just like Wilderness Trail, we're as active in the business as we need to be, but now that we're getting older and we've got a great team in place, we're very mindful of at some point there's got to be a succession. So, we're kind of stepping back a little bit and trying to, not micromanage it as much as we can. And then also getting into some other things, we've always been entrepreneurs at heart. And so we're kind of dabbling in some other things, including a lot of fishing and things like that too. So
nice. Yeah.
I'm still pretty active in the band. My band's LMA. We're getting ready to play a show over at Hillbilly Days on April the 18th. And then we're playing another show at the Nook in Danville on July the 6th, I believe. So we're staying active. I mean, like I said, I got a distillery, a fermentation company, a band, a couple of other things. I've got a big family that keeps me running all over the place. I live in D.C. now part-time. I'm in Danville.
Okay.
I'm in Danville right now, but I live in D.C. about a third of the time, which is a huge market for us. And I've kind of took it upon myself to set the example for everyone in our organization of, you want to see some damage done in the city, you're getting ready to see it up in D.C. And Baltimore and Philadelphia. And I'm just going to keep spreading like a wildfire until I make my point. But, so I stay busy up there. That's a huge market for us. And, it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
Shane's busy.
Great.
I'm busy.
Well, now, if you ever think about branching out into podcasts, let me know, because I know a guy.
Yeah. Know a guy with a bass guitar.
Yeah, I know a guy with a couple of bass guitars. Yeah, man, we could work something out there for sure, right?
Get together with Jason Calori with Mash and Drum and put together a podcast or a super band.
Oh yeah, he's a drummer, right? Is that right?
Yeah, Mash and Drum.
That's what I thought. Yeah, man, we could definitely do that, man. I haven't played in a band in a long
Bernie
time.
Lovers on guitar.
Oh, that's right, Bernie. I forgot about Bernie for sure.
Paul Hietko from Few Spirits.
Oh yeah, Paul. What does he do?
He played with us. We did a show actually at the American Craft Spirits Association a couple of years ago, and Paul joined us up on stage for, I think, a Bon Jovi song and maybe like some Tesla or something.
What does he play? Does he play guitar or?
He's a guitar player. He's got a band, I believe.
I didn't. We had Paul on the show, but it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, right, Matt? It's been a while.
It's been a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute, but he was such a good dude, man. He's one of those guys, man. Just I hate to use that term disruptor, but man, Paul was just like, he's that guy, right? So we had a good
He's
time.
got to deal with Alice in Chains now. I'm like, what?
Well, yeah, that's some good music though, for sure, man. We'll have to check that out, man. We can make something happen on that. So, Pat, what would you say? I'm just kind of curious. I like to ask all of our guests this before we wrap it up. What has been your favorite part of this journey for you so far?
Well, I'm a big fan of providing happiness, and I think that one of the things that makes me the happiest is just seeing how much joy that, not only, that, imparting this, not, like we're talking about transparency and different things. I mean, being a bourbon fan, knowing what I still love about bourbon. I mean, I get around Jimmy Russell and these guys, and I'm just as starstruck as I was, 10 or 15 years ago. And, being a part of that now and being able to impart the happiness and the joy that it brings to so many people is got to be probably one of my favorite things about it, whether it be teaching people something or providing a great experience at the distillery, promoting Kentucky's signature industry.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just, there's so many great things about this job, but the joy that we bring to the people probably is really my favorite.
Yeah, that's great. Talking about the distillery. So you guys are open to the public. People can come and do tours and visit. What can they expect when they come down there to visit you guys?
You can expect the best tour in the industry. That's for sure. We do a lot of, where we have all this background knowledge and different things. Our tour guides have been very well educated on some of the, more technical points. We're not going to sit there and bore you with DNA structures and everything, but we'll tell you as much as you want to know in a manner that's very simple to understand. You'll get a little bit more, I think, at our distillery than in terms of information. It's just our thing, you know. We don't have the 100-year heritage that a lot of the other distilleries have. And when you go to those distilleries, you're going to get a wonderful experience that is going to be very different than what you get at Wilderness Trail. So being a newbie, you know, we had to kind of create our own thing and you know, our own value proposition, I guess you could say. And that is, you know, the whole being the science guys of bourbon, and to impart that knowledge and how the expertise we use and how we make our products, and we tell people a lot about it. So, but when you take the tour, you get to see all the different parts of the process, you know, and there's a tasting. You get to actually visit one of the barrel warehouses. So it's a very comprehensive tour experience, and, you know, one of the best in the industry for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. So where can people get more information about Wilderness Trail and your products?
Yep. So we're on all the major social media channels. You know, I'm one of the old school Facebook people. My daughter has to be within 5 feet of me to make a successful Instagram post. And Twitter, I still ain't got that figured out.
Yeah.
But we are on all those. So, you know, if you put Wilderness Trail, you'll find it. I wish I probably should know that. But, you know, all those major outlets, there's a lot of different things that have been published about us. If you put Wilderness Trail in a Google search, you'll get 1,000 different things pop up if you're interested in learning more. And then bottom line, we encourage people to come to the distillery and see for yourself. You know, it's really something that, you know, where we've only been around for 10 years, people just don't expect the size of the facility. I mean, you come around the corner and all of a sudden you're like, God, there's 50. How many barrel warehouses is there here?
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's a real distillery.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something else that, you know, when we get people there, they're usually blown away.
Very cool. Well, Pat, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Thanks for taking the time. But any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Man, I tell you what, I'm just happy to be here, and I'm really glad to know you play bass guitar, because you're not going to get that phone call one day.
All right, I'm all about
and
it.
Matt,
man.
you need to be working on something, buddy.
I'll do my best.
Backup vocals or sitar, maybe bagpipe backup.
You could be our George Harrison, man. Get on the sitar and just start rocking out some things, right?
Go.
Yeah, man. If we're playing 90s and 2000s rock, I'm all about it, Pat. So I'm all for it. All right, Matt, final thoughts before we get out of here tonight, man.
Mark, I got to echo what you were saying. Pat, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been far too long since we tried to get you on that we finally got you nailed down, but I'm glad we did. Looking forward to doing this again with you in the future and seeing everything that you all have got coming up for us, for the public in the future. And just thanks for your commitment to quality, for being open about everything and doing things your way. We love it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, Pat, like I said, when I started talking earlier on the show, I mean, the first time I came out there, 2019, you didn't know me from anybody, man. And you and Shane just kind of welcomed me. And, you know, the guys that were there, obviously Matt or Mike and Bill and some other guys. I mean, you guys, even though I was kind of an outsider to the whole thing, I still felt like I was part of it. And that meant a lot to me. I mean, it really did. So I think it just spoke volumes as to how you guys are and how you operate and what you do. And then I got to see you guys actually the same year. You guys were at Whiskey Bear doing a tasting at the old Whiskey Bear.
I remember that.
And Matt, you went, right? So we were there and got to hang out with you guys as well. And just down there,
you guys probably made up 89% of the audience that day. We appreciate your attendance. That'd have been a lonely day without you.
It was an intimate setting, I will say that, but it was
right.
really informative. And I think Mark and I both really, it wasn't lost on us what we got to experience and who we got to talk to about what we were drinking in the company. Wilderness Trail. It was. Yeah,
I remember that. I remember you guys there, actually, now that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I tried to put any tastings that I do where less than 5 people show up out of my mind. But now that you mentioned it, I do remember your smiling faces there.
Oh, man. Well,
so very happy to see you.
It means a lot. It meant a lot. Obviously, it stuck with me. You know, so Pat, I appreciate that from a personal perspective, and just appreciate the fact that you've always done your own thing. You are who you are. And, you know, you love your music. You love your whiskey. You guys have created some incredible brands with Firm Solutions and also with Wilderness Trail, man. So congratulations on the Campari deal. I've talked to you. I've seen you, but I've not had a chance to really talk to you. So congratulations on that, man. That's huge. So excited for you guys. Can't wait to see where everything goes at this point, man. So hopefully we'll have you on the show again, and it won't be another 4 years before
I'm ready.
Before we get to do this. So with that said, I need to thank our sponsors, of course. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. Thank you, Liquor Barn, and all of our sponsors. Everything you guys do for us. Couldn't do the show without you guys. Thank you to our listeners. Like Matt always says, whatever time of day it is, morning, noon, or night, whenever it is you get your Bourbon Life fix, we appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to us or watch us on YouTube. Thank you guys for that. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can always find us on Facebook and Instagram. Of course, hey, we're on TikTok and YouTube now as well, of course, at The Bourbon Life. So check us out there. If you would, subscribe, follow us. We really appreciate that. If you feel so inclined, leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform, as long as it's a positive one. That's all I'm just kidding. You can leave us a review, whatever you want to say. We'll learn to deal with it. But with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send it home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Welcome to the kitchen table at James B. Beam Distilling Company, where every visit is a celebration of tradition and flavor. Did you know that the kitchen table is nestled right within the heart of the distillery? That's right. You can experience the essence of James B. Beam's legacy while savoring their delectable dishes. Join them every Wednesday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. for a culinary journey like no other. Planning a special event? Let the kitchen table be your host, creating unforgettable memories for you and your guests. And don't miss their exclusive Behind the Beam tour and monthly Claremont Supper Club events, which will feature their Overholt special releases at the April 18th event. For more information and reservations, visit beamdistilling.com. The kitchen table at James B. Beam Distilling Company. Come as a friend, leave as family. Discover the best of Ireland and America in every sip. Keeper's Heart Irish American Whiskey, crafted by a legendary Irish distiller, is a unique blend of smooth Irish whiskey and bold American whiskey that has garnered over 130 awards in just 2 short years. Whether finding the perfect gift for occasions like Mother's or Father's Day, Keeper's Heart is a perfect choice. Enjoy it neat, on the rocks, or in cocktails, and savor the perfect balance of flavors in every sip. Personalize a label for free on their website and use code KEEPERS10 for $10 off your order on keepersheartwhiskey.com.